everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Coffee and Careers. I am joined today by the Disability Studies and Community Inclusion faculty. Very excited to talk about this minor. It is really, really awesome, and you're going to hear some really great stuff about it. So, very excited to talk about it. I'm Erica O'Toole, Assistant Director in the Career Development Center, and I am the liaison to our Education and Human Services College. And I am joined by Shay Dawson, Dr. Shay Dawson, and Dr. Jodelle Haro. Very excited to have both of you on today for this week's episode. And as we do every week, kind of feels weird that it's at 1:30 on a Friday, but as we do every week, we talk about what's in our coffee. I am actually still finishing my coffee. So I have coffee with pumpkin spice creamer because we're, entering the fall season, so I have to bring out the pumpkin spice again. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Shay to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shay Dawson, Assistant Professor in Recreational Therapy, as well as the new Disability Studies and Community Inclusion program. I have been a big coffee drinker, but believe it or not, I gave up coffee about a week and a half ago. I know, I can't believe I'm even functioning right now. I usually drink coffee all day, but I have successfully given it up. And so I'm drinking water right now. And I have been drinking something called Teachino, which is like a chicory root tea, which has been pretty good. So not as good as coffee, but but it's been okay.
Nice. I'm Jodelle Haro, and I am faculty in counseling and special education. I'm an associate professor in special education and also an advisor in the Disability Studies and Community Inclusion minor. And I do drink coffee, but right now I'm having tea, and it's a berry tea right now, but I usually like chai tea. But I do recognize, like in the fall, the pumpkin that's my favorite. Yeah. So I'm really excited about the new pumpkin spice creamer. I'm a little jealous, Erica. Kind of want some right now, but I should have prepared ahead of time. So good. Just happy to be here today to talk about our minor. So
yes, and I know we were just talking before we got on, but so excited to have all of you back, all of the students. It's like such a different vibe on campus. So nice to see you all walking around campus, see you in our offices, see you all in the classrooms. It is just wonderful to have everyone back. It's amazing. Shay, weird time to give up coffee. So
I know, very weird.
Timing's everything, Shay.
I know. I should have waited.
So anyways, I am very excited to talk about this minor because just so many different things you can pair it with. And so I'm just excited for our students to hear about it. So either of you want to take this question, but why a Disability Studies and Community Inclusion minor?
Yeah, I can start, and Jodelle fill in here, but I'm just kind of thinking back to our first meeting actually 3 years ago. I arrived on campus and I was interviewing with the former dean, and she's like going through all of my background. She's like, "You really need to meet one of our faculty members, Jodelle Haro." And literally on my interview, they had said, "Jodelle's doing all this great work and is interested in disability studies." So once I arrived here, other people had mentioned that, like, "Hey, you two should probably talk because your passions are similar." So Jodelle reached out to me, we grabbed coffee, and I think we talked for about an hour and a half about starting this minor. And I came out of that meeting really excited because I had been really wanting to start a minor like this for several years at another university. And so when Jodelle, had met with me and we had talked about it, and she had already done a lot of work to get this thing going, I was pretty excited about it.
Yeah, it is exciting. And I think I started working on it when I arrived at CMU in 2013 because I'm just passionate about disability and particularly disability studies. And so I actually heard about Shay from my students who were taking his course and my course at the same time and said, you really should probably talk. And so we did. But the reason I think for me, disability studies is so incredibly important because disability is the largest minority group that anyone can join at any time. And when I start my courses with that that quote, the students it really causes you to pause for a minute and really think that, because we don't actually think about that. We don't walk through life thinking that it could just happen to us at any time. And earlier, Erica, you said, it pairs with a lot of different majors and disciplines. And I would say it pairs with all of them, because there's just not, I can't think of any situation that you may not encounter someone with a disability or become disabled yourself. And so I've been a special education teacher almost my entire career. And disability studies shifted my entire perspective about disability, and it made me a better special education teacher, but it's also made me just a better human being. In the way that I think about disability, it's not just about school. It's not just about K-12 education or PK-12 education. Disability doesn't stop when students graduate. And so it really makes you think about our world and how accessible our world is and how inclusive it is. And that, when we think about disability being the largest minority group, but we don't actually think about making things accessible, that's interesting. So my hope was to engage our students, our undergraduates, in really thinking differently about disability and how it aligns with their future profession.
Yeah, and I think statistically, it's really astounding if you look at the data on how many people have disabilities. I met with a professional that's working in public health and disability for the state of Michigan, and they just have some survey data that came back on how many people in the state of Michigan have a diagnosable disability, and it's at 30% in the state of Michigan. So nearly 1 in 3 people are walking around with a diagnosable sort of disability, but we often don't think like that, right? Most of the people I ask, like, how many people do you think have disabilities, or what do you think the largest minority group? And nobody ever says disability. No. So, if you think about it, if you're in business or if you're really any profession or professional is going to be working with the general population, and 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people are probably going to be touched by disability in some way. So it makes the minor really applicable in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I think it's also knowing that disability isn't just visible. We have a tendency to believe that accommodations and accessibility is only important to people with vision disabilities or physical disabilities, and it's understanding that there are a lot of invisible disabilities, and that impacts the lived experience of people with those disabilities.
Absolutely. And I really love how you said you start your class journal, because people, you don't think about that at any time it could impact your life and anyone in your family. And so I think that is what's so important, is that maybe sometimes you don't realize that until it does affect you in a direct way. But it's amazing how many ways this can connect to so many of our students and so many majors. Literally, like you said, every major this can fit into. So I love that we're talking about this one today.
Shay and I even talked once about, when we hear students thinking about, architecture or, types of engineering and spaces, we think about, well, how would their inclusion in this type of minor impact the way that they think about how they're going to design space or create space and make it accessible. And, I've been teaching these minor courses as part of the university program for a couple of years before the minor was approved. And I've had students from a lot of different disciplines. And what's interesting to me is how often they'll say, like, my grandpa is a wheelchair user, and I never thought about our house not being accessible. And we want to celebrate, big events together, and we can't do that in our house because it's not accessible. So it's things like that. This minor will raise people's awareness of those things. And once you know those things, you can't not know that anymore. So it does Absolutely. Influence the way that they proceed in their discipline.
Absolutely. I was just thinking about that. My dad had ALS, and not to get too personal, but I was thinking the same thing. I came from a fashion merchandising background, and I never would have thought like this could pair with me. But then seeing my dad go through everything he went through, there was so many things that could be designed that could have helped him. And so even something like in those types of fields, fashion merchandising, interior design, there's so many different things that you compare with it that you don't think of. So, yeah.
When I worked my previous job working at Bradford Woods, Indiana University's Outdoor Center, we'd run all these camps for kids with disabilities. And oftentimes, we'd be working with them in the cabins, helping them to dress and whatnot. And they'd oftentimes say, these shoes are just not designed for me. I really shouldn't have shoestrings. And so if you have shoes that have Velcro or things that can slip on and off, that's great. But oftentimes those shoes also don't look the most stylish. So, so can you make them stylish and functional?
Absolutely.
And most people would never think of that. But there's just so many ways that disability touches these different professions as you start to dissect it and really unpack it.
Absolutely, for sure. So what does disability studies mean? And what is community inclusion? Because I think taking those two things apart, maybe students have some questions about that. And then why did you guys decide to put those two ideas together?
Yeah. Do you want to take disability studies first and I'll do community inclusion?
Sure. So disability studies is more like the theoretical approach, and it's an interdisciplinary field. It investigates and evaluates and enhances Western society's understandings of disability, because disabled people continue to be the most marginalized and oppressed group of people in the world. And disability studies actively seeks to dismantle systemic ableism by promoting an understanding of disability as a natural part of the human condition, not something that's bad or something that, we should actively avoid, because it's not bad. Disability studies really has a more prideful approach to disability, and just focusing more on making the world more accessible. And when we make the world accessible to people with disabilities, we make it accessible to everyone. So if we bring that lens to everything that we do, we automatically increase our inclusion of people and our accessibility. So disability studies is, I think, it's just a really broad way of thinking about disability. It's not just education, it's everything. It's thinking about, political implications and economic implications and, healthcare. It really crosses every single area, because, like I said, disability doesn't occur in a vacuum, and it doesn't occur in isolation either. So.
Yeah, and community inclusion is really including people in various walks of life within society and actively sort of seeking to do that. So if you think about different areas that you might want to participate in society, it could be a student going to school. It could be K through 12 or college, but it also might be someone joining the workforce. Other areas that you oftentimes don't think about, but recreation and leisure areas are really important. And I'll tell you a quick story that really highlights kind of community inclusion. I was working with a parent. I was talking to it, and this was a dad, and his son had spina bifida. And he had told me, he said, Shay, I really kind of grieved, not really the disability, but I had thought in my mind, I really wanted to watch my child play sports. And I was really looking forward to going and watching him play basketball. And so I grieved that for many years until they found an adaptive sport clinic in Indianapolis. And all of a sudden they got on this team, and he's on this wheelchair basketball team, and they're really good, and they're traveling around. And he said, it really hit me. He said, he almost got tears in his eyes. He's sitting in the stands with all these parents of kids with physical disabilities. And he's like, I'm here watching my kid. And, I never thought this was possible. And so that's community inclusion, and it's also the purest form is getting people with disabilities mixed in with people without disabilities for equal access in all areas of life. And so I think combining the two is innovative in a way, because the students learn theoretically what is disability studies and all the great things Jodelle is mentioning, the statistical, background behind it. But then they also start understanding, well, what do we do to make a change? How do we become a change agent in the world, and not just talk about it, but actually put something into motion? And that's one thing I really love about the disability, is just blending those two together. And my hope is that we do have students that will take this and they'll take their major and they will design that shoe that's going to be accessible but also trendy, right? They're going to be an entrepreneurial business major that starts businesses that have owners that have disabilities, things like that are really going to be on the cutting edge.
Yeah, I think, we have a lot of disciplines that focus on disability, and traditionally those come from a very medicalized perspective, that we're going to treat the disability or fix the disability, or develop an individualized approach for addressing it. And while that's okay too, disability studies actually looks at it a little differently, in that it isn't about fixing or remediating any type of disability. It's actually about empowering people with disabilities to lead really full lives and feel included in communities. And part of that is really dismantling ableism. And we all are ableist in a lot of ways, and without even thinking. And so one of the things we focus on in the courses that I teach that align nicely with what Shay does out, when we are preparing them for community inclusion, is that, it isn't about non-disabled people helping disabled people. It's about us living in shared space and understanding one another better. So one of the things that I think is, if I ask students like what they take away from one of the courses that I teach, I think it's just really critiquing what we value in our world. So for example, we place a lot of value. I teach a writing intensive course, so that's why I'm going to pick on that for a minute. Like, we place a lot of value on the written expression, right? Being able to write a really, solid paper and cite our sources. And so we place a whole lot of value on that. But there are a lot of people in the world that can't write like that. But that doesn't mean they don't have anything to say, or that that there's another way for them to express themselves besides writing. And so we actually do a couple of readings and a video about an individual who's nonverbal. And the assumption was that they were cognitively or intellectually impaired. And the reality was they were not intellectually impaired. They just weren't able to communicate verbally. And that's what we tend to value. So the assumption was that they weren't intelligent. So it's really kind of just, systematically deconstructing all of those beliefs and assumptions that we have. And those are those moments when students are like, I never even thought about that. Yeah. So that's, I think, pairing that kind of idea with, then they actually go out in the community and really apply it, I think, is what makes this minor powerful.
That's awesome. So I think we kind of talked about how this minor applies to really all majors, but what type of student might be interested in the new disability studies and community inclusion minor?
Yeah, there are a lot of different students. I actually really enjoy looking at my class list before the class starts each semester, because you just have really no idea where these students are going to come from. So I have a finance major in one of my classes right now. I have a handful of communication science disorder majors that would like to go on to become speech therapists. We have, I've had a decent amount of event management, people that really want to work with the public. They want to put on events. They may want to be a wedding planner, and they want to understand how to work with a client that might have a disability, or somebody that's going to be coming to the wedding that has a disability. So it's varied. Like Jodelle had mentioned, engineering's a really good one for this as well, of how to design. Fashion merchandising, we've had a few students there. So really all walks of life across campus. And I was telling my students actually yesterday, it's one of the things I enjoy about the class is just the perspectives that they have and how they're taking the things that Jodelle's mentioning, and they have this aha moment, but the way they apply it is usually to what they're learning in their other classes in their major. Mm-hmm. And so the students have a lot of different things to say, and we learn from each other, which makes it a really kind of rich learning environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just add to that what I'm finding semester after semester is I have students in my class with disabilities, invisible disabilities,
Yeah.
and they say for the first time in their educational career, they feel like they are seen, and that and valued, and that it's okay to disclose that they have a disability, because that's the space that I try to cultivate in my classroom, is that this is a safe space, and we're going to talk about disability from a very positive perspective, and that if we cannot dismantle ableism if we don't destigmatize disability. And so we talk a lot about language, and how they will hear special needs all the time. They talk about kids with special needs or adults with special needs, and we talk about, well, what does that actually mean? And if we're really referring to disability, then why aren't we using the word? So we talk a lot about how euphemisms aren't useful, and thinking about disability and actually making any sort of real positive change. And it also continues to stigmatize disability, which is not, we want to destigmatize it. But I think for me, that's probably been one of the most important things for me, is hearing CMU students say that I have a disability and I feel seen, and I'm so happy to take a class about this so I can learn more about it for myself.
Absolutely. That's absolutely amazing that our students are feeling so comfortable. But I think that also says something about both of you as well as faculty, that they feel that comfortable with you to talk to you about that. And one thing I also wanted to mention, as we're talking about what majors pair with this, sure, there's the majors that have already been paired with this. It's a fairly new minor. But I think the most important thing to talk about here too is that students could probably come and talk to both of you if they have ideas. There's probably majors out there so far, or majors out there, that haven't really been paired a whole lot with it. And maybe, students can come talk to you about it. I think both of you have great ideas in this whole area. So, I think that that's what makes this unique as well, is that there are so many different ways that students could pair with it. And both of you always have really great ideas with that as well. So.
Yeah, we talked about journalism and, broadcasting and how, the way we write about disability matters. So, yeah, you're right. There are a lot of majors that students are pursuing right now that would pair nicely with this that we haven't even talked about.
Yeah.
I love talking about it, so they can come see me anytime.
Yeah. Broadcasting is a good one. In my class, I do a lot of references to pop culture. Yes. And one of the things we look at is just how the news likes to sensationalize everything. And, so one of the things that's a bit damaging to folks with disabilities is we're always looking for them to be an inspiration to us. And so if you ever watch the news, you'll see this all the time, is the stories are always meant to be inspiring to people without disabilities. And so when you listen to folks with disabilities, students in the class or people within the disability movement, you'll hear how they don't really want to be an inspiration, and how that can be damaging. So the broadcasting majors or journalism majors, I think, have a strong role to play in how they present disability. And so we talk about a lot, there's not many options out there to watch a movie or a documentary or a show where you just learn about everyday life of someone with a disability, where they develop the character and you get to see everyday life. But when that does happen, it's really enlightening. And so I show up a documentary called Murder Ball. Sounds really terrible name, but it's a quad rugby documentary on the Paralympic quad rugby team. And the students are shocked because it's one of the first times they've ever watched something real about disability that's just real, and it's a person, and it's, and it's like, oh, this was really enlightening. So yeah, I love the broadcasting and journalism majors. That's a good point, Jodelle.
Very interesting. So we've already been talking for a good amount of time. Time always flies when I'm talking with you both. But I really want to get to the study abroad program because it sounds so interesting. And I think a lot of our students would love to hear it. So could you tell me a little bit about the study abroad program, and then also maybe some alternatives for students that aren't able to study abroad?
Yeah, I can talk about the study abroad trip. So there's a new class called RPL 312, Disability in Southeast Europe. And this is a faculty-led study abroad trip that I've been leading for a number of years. When I worked at Indiana University, I actually started a trip there with a colleague that's now at Temple. And then when I came to CMU, I really wanted, this was a priority to really start this here. So we've already taken one trip. And then, of course, it was canceled due to COVID last year, but we are approved for 2022. This is a fantastic trip where we travel to Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Slovenia. And we look at disability in Southeast Europe and this sort of post-communist, these post-communist countries that sort of formed out of the former Yugoslavia. And we talk about the civil war that took place in the 90s and the fallout of that, and how does that impact people with disabilities today, and the social systems over there that either support or do not support disability well. And we see a variety of programs, some super cutting edge, innovative programs that are doing some really amazing work with limited resources. And then we see some programs that it looks like you're stepping back into institutional life in the 1940s in the United States. And so we compare and contrast those in those countries, but we can compare and contrast all of those programs to the United States as well, because we're very similar in that we have some really great programs here, but we also have some programs that are not so great. And so we're talking about that for 3 weeks together. Typically, there's about 12 to 13 students that go with us on the trip. Jodelle and I will actually be going together this summer, so she'll get to go and check it out for the first time. But it's my favorite class to teach for sure. And more learning gets done in that 3 weeks than an entire semester of classes. So it's a fantastic trip and really looking forward to it.
That sounds amazing.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Finally.
Absolutely. Yeah. That sounds incredible. I mean, if I was a student, that sounds like an amazing experience.
Yeah, it's been a good one. I've taken 4 different groups in 4 different years. And what's also really neat is the students really get to know each other over those 3 weeks, and you get to know them well. And so when you have them back in your courses, one of the side benefits is the amount of learning that takes place with those students. And then those students also, we tend to see them become leaders because they've gone into this super novel experience in these countries that they never thought they would go to. And then you just see their confidence and their self-esteem go up. And a lot of these students end up becoming leaders when they come back in the classroom and out of the classroom, which is really fun to watch.
How cool. That's so awesome. Well, thank you both. I mean, we're getting to the end of our time here, and I've just loved learning about this minor. I think our students probably have loved it as well. And I'm hoping you'll get lots of students coming in and talking to you guys about the minor, because I mean, what a great opportunity to pair this with so many different things. Any last ideas or things that you would like to tell our students that might be listening?
Well, the only thing I would say is that, if for some reason the study abroad thing is not, accessible for a student for any number of reasons, then they could take the Disability Studies capstone course, which then it focuses more on the disability studies field. And then it takes all of the knowledge and information that they gained throughout the entire minor, and then they actually apply it in a disability related research or service project. So, and that project aligns specifically with whatever their major field is. So
awesome.
Yeah. So our capstones, we have a couple of options for students so that they feel like the minor is really, that it culminates in a really interesting and engaging product, whether they get to go study abroad or they get to actually do a service project. So
yeah, the last thing I would say is, if you're interested, reach out to Jodelle or myself. Jodelle advises last names A through M, and I advise the students with last names towards the end of the alphabet. So shoot us an email. We'd love to chat with you and talk to you more about this dynamic minor.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much for joining me today. I had so much fun talking about this.
We love talking about this.
Yeah,
Thank you for having us.
anytime.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you everyone who's watching. We hope you have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.